If you'd like to, please subscribe. It helps me out a lot. I post every Wednesday.
Hey everyone, my name is Catherine and welcome to my channel. I've talked a lot about group travel and I wanted to go over today just things that you generally need to know about group trips before you take them, things that I have learned. I've compiled a list on my phone, so I will be looking down at my phone and tell you all about group travel. So first off, group trips are not all created equally. Of course, you could probably assume when you go from company to company or even with different trips within the company, just given that they're in different regions of the world, that different trips will be created in different ways. They all won't look the same across the board. So for example, with Kentucky, oftentimes you may think, oh, Kentucky is a cheaper tour company than say EF Ultimate Break, but that is because with Kentucky, flights are not included. So you will be responsible for your own flights. And as you can imagine, that is one of the top, if not the top costs when it comes to traveling. Whereas with EF Ultimate Break, the prices you see firsthand are with flights. You have the option to buy without flights, but originally when you first go on the website, they will be the ones with flights. So that is one example of how trips can vary. Also, there are different themes, I guess you could say, to different trips. There are some trips like the organizations that I just mentioned that have specific ages, such as Kentucky or EF Ultimate Break. Again, those are 18 to 35. There are group travel trips that are for all ages. There are group travel trips that may be geared towards older people. And there are even EF trips or other organizations that do high school-led trips. So really find what kind of trips you would want to do. In addition to that, like I mentioned with themes, I've been looking into tours to go into South Korea. And one of the tours I was looking at was a specifically food-themed tour. So there you go to cooking classes, you try a lot of different places. Obviously, no matter where you go, you're going to try different restaurants because you're going to want to eat throughout your tour. But specifically, there are themed tours. The next thing, and probably one of the reasons why I love tours so much and they're my go-to way of travel, is just that they're easy. They're all planned out for you. You don't really have to do much. You just have to decide where you want to go, with who and when, and just book it. And other than just kind of filling out basic information, paying for it, etc., it's pretty much planned for you. Another thing about group tours that I love is that they're just generally safer. It is safer to travel in groups, travel in numbers, especially if you're going to destinations that may generally be not as safe to go, especially if you're a woman or if you're traveling single or all of the above. Those are great. People oftentimes think that tours can be more expensive than just doing a travel trip on your own, but you also have to remember all of the things that the tour company is doing for you. And of course it varies, again, on so many factors. It may be more expensive to go on a tour company, but oftentimes it actually isn't more expensive to travel with a tour company than to do things on your own, because with tour companies, they can get special discounted rates for booking hotels because they have relationships with those hotels. They're getting that tour or group discount along with flights. Honestly, in some ways, not only is it more convenient, but it could possibly even be cheaper, again, depending on what you're trying to do. Now, next is optionals. So for every single tour that you're going to do, there's going to be optionals. So there will be the set things that the tour company has booked for you that is pretty much not required to do, but it is a part of the price of the tour, so you might as well go and do them. They're usually the most common must-see top things to do in the destination that you're going to, but then there will be also optionals as well. And those oftentimes, of course, it's up to you, do your research. Sometimes they're good optionals, sometimes they're not so good. Usually I would say they're pretty good options, and of course it depends on your interests as well. I will say on these tour companies, typically 80% of the people that are on these tour companies do the optionals. Really budget for that as well. So know that you don't just have to budget for the tour itself, but there will be other additional costs. So to remember and keep that in mind. With tours, of course, accommodations will be included in the price. Generally with cheaper or younger skewing demographic tours, you will be put with a roommate, and there may be times where you will be in hostels, for example. It really just depends. For example, with EF Ultimate Break, they have regular, which just won't say anything specifically on the tour page, or they have Ultimate Plus. With Ultimate Plus, it may be a bit more expensive. You will still have a roommate, but you will not be in hostels. You will be in nicer accommodations, and it'll just be a bit nicer. All the regular perks of a regular tour, but just with a little bit of an upgrade. But with regular trips or with Kentucky or something like that, you will get a variety of hostels or like 3-4 star hotels, things like that. So just know if you're going on one of those trips, you will have a roommate. If you are traveling with a friend, obviously you can put down their name and you will be roomed together. If you're going solo, you will be paired with a roommate. You will have the option to be able to upgrade as well to your own solo room. For the most part, I would say, unless it's a really long tour or you're just really about wanting your own room, to just try and have a roommate for that week or two. So now with food. So with food on these tours, you can pretty much always assume and guarantee that every breakfast will be included. A lot of times it'll just be the hotel breakfast, and then some lunches and some dinners will be included. Usually the first and last dinners are included, and then some lunches and dinners sporadically throughout the trip. But I will say most of the lunches and dinners in between the first and last days will not be included, which just means that you will have to budget extra to be able to not go hungry and be able to feed yourself. There will be usually suggestions that the tour guide will give you so you're not like completely on your own, and a lot of times the group will go together, or half the group or a third of the group, to somewhere and eat. You will just have to pay for it on your own. So next is drinking and partying, especially with the younger skewing tour groups, which of course this is kind of what I'm mostly talking about on these videos because that's what I'm familiar with. But that's always going to be the case with any tour that you go on. That's going to be some people, if not a good chunk of the people, are going to be into that. And there's always people who are just traveling to be able to drink and party. Like, that is their main goal. And yeah, it's just something to be aware of and to expect. Of course, if you don't want to do that, like I don't want to do that, I'm there to travel, I'm there to be sober and to fully experience everything. These tours, they're mostly always early morning starts, and I want to get a good night's rest. I don't want to be exhausted, and I want to fully experience the country. You can drink and party anywhere. So for me, it's not something that I'm very interested in, but there's always someone where that's like their main goal and that's what they want to do, and they'll be up all night and then just passed out on the bus the next day. As long as everyone just does what they want to do and no one's hurting each other or themselves, that shouldn't be a big issue. There's always also going to be people who don't want to party and don't want to drink, so there are definitely going to be people on both sides. The next is with free or spare time. Again, the amount you get depends on the tour company and where you go. For example, in Egypt on Kentucky, I didn't get as much spare time just because of safety. They just didn't want to have us on our own going out and about. But maybe on some Europe trips, or even when I went to Ecuador and Costa Rica, there was a decent amount of free time, and it's pretty much guaranteed almost every day, unless it's like a big transportation day where you're going from one city to the other. For the most part, there will be a decent amount of free time, so just to do your research ahead of time to know what you're interested in doing and looking into the specific cities that you're going to, and just to not be afraid to do what you want to do, because oftentimes I feel like someone who's maybe more of the extrovert or the tour guide or something like that will have a suggestion, and then everyone will just flock and do that because they don't want to be alone, which is fair, especially if you're traveling single in a foreign country and you don't want to go off on your own. But if you really want to do something, let your tour guide know, let the other people know, or just if it's safe and you feel comfortable, just to do it on your own. I know what it's like to want to do certain activities and then being shy and just kind of letting the crowd kind of decide for you where you're going, and then kind of regretting not doing that later on. That's exactly what happened actually with me when I was in Japan, but when I was studying abroad, is I just kind of followed the crowds and I didn't do too much research. That's why I want to go again, to be able to do all the things that I did not do the first time I was in Japan. Also know that there will be a lot of bus time. So you will fly, most likely for most tours, depending on where you're coming from and going, but you will fly to the country that you're going to. And then while you're in the country, you will be busing from city to city. Sometimes there's flights in the between the different places, such as in Ecuador, we flew to the Galapagos during the trip just because they are islands, you can't really bus there, but for the most part, you will be busing, and that will be the main mode of transportation. So just know that you will be on buses a lot. So that is a great time for people to catch up on sleep. That is a great time to just have like your chill me time, reflecting, bring maybe a journal or an iPad with some preloaded movies and TV shows where you don't need Wi-Fi to watch them. Just bring things that you can entertain yourself with while on a bus. I know sometimes people can get motion sickness if they read or watch something on buses, so just do what works for you. Honestly, for the most part, I do feel like most people just take naps, even if you're not one of the partiers, because these trips are exhausting. I love my sleep. I feel like I do need like a good 8 hours of sleep to function for the most part, but I'm not a napper. I never nap. And on these tours, I become a napper. I'm just like, I remember being on a boat when we were going from island to island in the Galapagos, and I fell asleep on the boat. And it's like, you would think normally you'd be on a boat, it's exciting, but everyone was falling asleep because these trips are exhausting. So they're just good times to also get your naps in. Now, the number one rule for these tours that I'm not mentioning apparently until towards the end of the video is to just not be late. Your tour director will tell you, just because, as you can imagine, a tour, especially the bigger the tour, it is on a very tight run schedule. If you're late getting on the bus, then the bus is going to be late going to this next tour, which means you're going to be late to the next thing, and it just kind of ruins everything going down the line. And if you're late enough, you could even be left behind, but at the very least you will be scolded, and that is like the quickest way to piss off everybody, including your tour director. And I'm somebody that's normally late. Be aware of what your time management looks like, and if you're somebody that tends to be late, especially in the mornings when you have to be ready to go, just maybe give yourself extra time, because I feel like you always need more time than you think, especially when you're leaving and checking out of hotel to get on the bus in the mornings. So just don't be late is the main thing that you just need to remember and follow. And the very last thing I wanted to mention is that you will make lifelong friends. So going into this, you could be very nervous like I have been, and going solo especially, but in the end, I've never had a tour where I didn't make friends by the end of it. Sometimes it may take a couple of days just because, again, you're meeting all these new people in this new place, and it takes a couple of days to adjust. And the great thing about meeting people on these tours is that they're more likely to travel with you in the future. They're more likely to be able to follow through on planning for trips. And if they live in different cities than you, which most likely that will be the case, you can travel and meet them. I've had people who were passing through the Seattle area meet up with me. I've met up with people in New York City or wherever else they may be from. When I went to Australia and lived there for a few months and did an internship, I was able to meet up with my Australian friends that I met on Kentucky trips, and it's just so fun to have friends from around the world. Of course, you're not gonna keep up with all of them all the time, but it's so nice when you happen to be like a year or two down the line or even longer in a part of the world and be like, hey, I know someone who lives here, and then you meet up with them. And it's just so much fun to just have friends that aren't just in the bubble of the city that you live in. It's just so great having friends from all over the place. Let me know if you've traveled before on any of these tours or if you want to. And again, I actually have a discount code if you want to do an EF Ultimate Break trip. I'm obsessed with them. I did 2 last year. I have a couple booked for this year, and I've been doing them for the most part every year outside of the pandemic time frame when it was, no travel allowed, since 2015. So big fan here. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in a future video of mine. Bye!